Hey, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Amanda, and this is Beyond a Ballot.
powered by DoorDash. Today's episode is a special International Women's Day conversation we're calling The First. We're joined by two women who helped reshape Canadian politics from opposite sides of the aisle, Deborah Gray and Sheila Copps. Deb Gray made history as the first Reform Party MP elected to Parliament, a breakthrough moment that helped redefine conservative politics in Canada. Sheila Copps broke barriers as Canada's first female deputy prime minister and one of the most high-profile cabinet ministers of her generation. They were pioneers, they were competitors, and they were among the first in space that hadn't made room for women before them. Today, we'll talk about what it meant to go first, the resistance they faced, the doors they opened, and what International Women's Day means now in a political climate that's still evolving. This is The First. Our first guest today didn't just enter federal politics, she changed it. In 1989, Deb Gray became the first MP elected under the Reform Party banner, sending a message that Western frustration had found a voice in Ottawa. Years later, she would make history again as Canada's first female leader of the official opposition, breaking barriers while holding the government to account. Outspoken, principled, and never afraid of a fight, Deb Gray has helped reshape modern conservatism in this country. Deb is a dear friend of mine, and she joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you. How fun is this?
It is so fun. And I have to tell our listeners the history of this interview because last year on International Women's Day, Amanda and I were talking about women that we love and we respect. And I talked about you, Deb, and how much your book impacted my life when I was a young staffer in Ottawa, that I got to Ottawa and I would read it every Saturday morning at the Atomic Rooster, having my $4.99 breakfast because that's all I could afford on a political salary. And it really changed my thinking about politics in general. So I'm really, really thrilled to have you here, especially on International Women's Day.
And we had not met then yet,
We
I
had
don't
not
think.
met then.
No,
That's
we had
right.
not. But we did soon after that.
Yes, and
Yes.
we just hit it off. And you have been such a supporter.
We've just hugged and hugged ever since then.
You are just tons of laughs and so brilliant and so much history. So let's dive in there and talk about who is Deb Gray.
Sure. Oh my. Well, I grew up in Vancouver. I am girl number 4 and youngest sister, and then we have a younger brother. And this was in the late 50s. I was born in 52. And my father had a drinking problem, disappeared from our lives, and any credit for me being cool is my mom Joyce, who was the ultimate in cool. She raised 5 kids by the scruff of the neck, single mom in the late 50s and through the 60s till we were all finished school. And she got a job at a lamp shop and kept us all fed and kept us together. The angrier she got, the quieter she got. And that's terrifying because some people, if they just shriek, then they get it over with. But Mumsy just got quieter and quieter the angrier she got. So you're just craning like this to hear that you're actually grounded. As she said it in a whisper, I'm so disappointed in you, Deborah. And when she called me Deborah, I thought, oh, it's terrifying. Anyway, she died just not many years ago at 95 and a half. So she had just a great run. So I grew up in Vancouver, finished high school. I went to Camp Homewood on Quadra Island near Campbell River, where I live now. And it's just a 10-minute ferry ride across to Quadra. I heard that Jesus loved me, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know anything about that. And so the counselors at camp, they said, Jesus can really make a difference in your life. So I thought they were pretty cool. And I was actually, you'd be stunned to hear this, but in quite a bit of trouble at school for talking too much and being too mouthy and being an advocate for people. So my vice principal at the end of grade 8, which was going to be my second year at camp, said, Deborah. Then it was Deborah. I thought, oh, because I was always Debbie. And he said, if you don't change your behavior next year, going into grade 9, I'm going to have to suspend you. Okay, well, remember everything I just said about Joyce, Mumsy. I thought, no, this can't happen. So I stood up, reached across the table, shook his hand, and said, I'll be better next year, I promise. And he said, well, okay, we'll see what happens on the first day of school. So I knew I was in big trouble. My mom didn't know any of this little chit chat that we had, but I knew I was in trouble. I knew my life could spiral right out of control. So you could use this energetic force of nature for good or for mischief or for bad. And I knew I was going down that bad trail just because. And so at camp, I said, well, if these people really believe it, I'm going to give it a shot. So I said, okay, Jesus, I want you to make a difference in my life. And if it's real, I'll find out. And if it isn't, I'll find that out too. So I went back. It did make a difference. I went back the first day of school and knocked on Mr. McPherson's door, and he answered the door and said, already? And so I said, I have something to tell you. And so he said, hit me. So I said, well, I've just become a Christian at Camp Homewood, and I want you to know you won't have any more trouble with me again. And he said, I've never heard that one before.
Wow.
And so that was going into grade 9. And then when I graduated from high school, I got, the award of merit, citizenship award, girls athlete, ta-la-la-la. And when I walked across the stage and shook his hand, he whispered in my ear, who'da thunk it? So my life was, isn't that cool? And I thought, there it is. That's, well, the ultimate payback, you could say. But to me, it was just the ultimate coolest thing ever. And so that trajectory put me on a path of caring about people, about serving, about advocating for people. I always wanted to be a teacher because it seemed to me I had some pretty lousy ones. And so I thought I could make up and balance it out. So I went to Bible school for 3 years after high school because I was pretty limited in any biblical knowledge. And then I went to Trinity Western, started my degree in Langley, Trinity Western. It wasn't a full-blown university then. I just got 2 years, and then moved up to Alberta and got my degree in Edmonton at the University of Alberta, got a BA in English and sociology, and then took a B.Ed after degree and became a teacher. Taught out at Frog Lake Reserve, out on close to the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, and just absolutely loved it. I lived in the bush, taught in a little town. I taught on the reserve first, and then taught in a little town, and just gained so many great experiences. So all that for background, and then to say that I was up having coffee and birthday cake for a pal up at my friend Liz and Jack White's in September 1988. And Mulrooney was prime minister. Don Mazinkowski, his deputy prime minister, was my MP. And so I just felt like one of those Westerners that said, wait a minute, you already declared a majority government, but I haven't even gone to vote yet. And that was very frustrating. So I said to Liz, who are we going to vote for in this election? I knew one was coming up in 88, but she said, well, I'm going to vote for Preston Manning and the Reform Party. And I said, what? Who's he? I knew Ernest Manning because he had a tremendous amount of respect as Premier of Alberta. So I said, well, what are they? Are they a bunch of Western separatist wackos? I'm a proud and passionate Canadian. I wear red every day because it's the color of my flag. My liberal friends say, oh, you're wearing liberal red. No, I'm not. It's the color of my flag. So, and I'm a July 1st baby. So how can you argue with that,
That's right.
So anyway, my neighbor Liz said, Deb, you should run. We don't have a candidate yet here. So why don't you run? This is September 15th, okay? I'm a teacher. I said, Liz, I'm just a little busy right now. Teaching grades 7 to 12 English, teaching half a dozen other subjects. And so I said, I'm a little busy. And she said those fateful words, I dare you.
Oh.
And I thought, ooh, never. I was 36. I had never not taken a dare. So I thought, ooh, this presents a real situation here. Anyway, just a whole bunch of kind of ridiculous chain of events happened. I was flying out to Vancouver from Edmonton for my brother's wedding, and the people, Liz, phoned the Riding Association president and said, I think I have a candidate here. So she says, talk to Pat Churn on the phone. So I said, okay, hello? And she said, you're thinking of becoming our candidate, are you? No, maybe I was being groomed for the job. I was so diplomatic. I said, why don't you send me your platform and I'll have a look at it? And so she did. And I picked it up at the Dewberry post office on my way into Edmonton to fly out. So I'm sitting at the airport reading this stuff thinking, well, you girls are too young to remember that. I was country when country wasn't cool. I thought, I'm a reformer before there was any such thing as reform. It was me. Fiscal responsibility.
It was like you read this document and you felt like it was everything, all your values. It was all summed up in this platform.
That platform. Yeah. Of course, I hadn't read it all yet, but everything I had read, I agreed with. When I saw this distinguished looking older fellow walking straight toward me at the airport, and he says, oh, can't help but notice what you're reading there, because it had the logo on it. And so I, again, trying to be diplomatic, said, it looks really interesting, sir, but I just got this in the mail and I'm having a look. I said, it looks great. I'm enjoying it. And then he says to me, my name is Gordon Shaw. I'm the vice chairman of the party. I've been up in Edmonton having meetings with Preston Manning.
Wow.
And I said,
no.
Oh. And I said, whether you're a person of faith or whatever, it doesn't matter. And we, I think, especially as women, know this. When something big is happening in your life, the hair on the back of your neck goes like that. Yeah. And I just thought, yowza. So we sat together on the plane and talked all the way out there. And he said, well, Preston's going to be in Edmonton whenever, the next Monday night. And so I went to my brother's wedding, talked to my family, and my mom said, Dad, do you think that you would like to do this? And I said, Mom, I think it'd be a tremendous challenge. And, I have that passion in my heart. And so she said to me, well, you became an English teacher. And I was stunned by that, because she is a voracious reader and I'm not. I have to confess this now on a national podcast, probably a worldwide yikes. Anyway, I am literate, but I'm not a born reader. And so she said, well, what the world, go for it. So I had everyone's blessing, and I got home really late Sunday night, because I lived 3.5 hours from the airport in Edmonton. So I taught all day Monday and then drove back into Edmonton Monday night, heard Preston speak. And I thought, that's me. He wrote this for me.
Really?
And so I just really thought it was great. So then I went back home and went back to school the next day. And a guy, Neil Weir was his name, he phoned, because, of course, this Gordon Shaw had given him my name. So he called me and said, we're looking for a candidate out your way. And anyway, I said, well, I'll go to a meeting. So it turned out that I went to this meeting and met this Pat Churn in person. And then the election was coming along. So, of course, I was teaching. So I had to take 6 weeks off with no pay, find a substitute. And then I campaigned all the fall of 1988. This is ancient history. You guys were probably not even born then. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, I ran, and I think 80 reformers ran, 80 or 88, and 80 out of the 88 seats, I think, in Western Canada. And none of us won. But I thought, what a great field trip that was. My principal had asked me to teach social studies 10 that year. And I said, Henry, I will teach social studies, but I can't do science or math, okay? But social was okay. And it was about all Canadian government and Canadian geography and history. So I kept a chapter ahead of the kids. And I thought, well, what a great field trip this will be to talk about Canadian government. And so anyway, I came a really distant fourth. And then this is the riding Beaver River. What could be more Canadian than Beaver River?
Totally.
So anyway, and there really is a Beaver River, and it really did flow just north of where I lived by Frog Lake Reserve. So anyway, the fellow that won, his name was John Dahmer, and he got really sick really fast during the campaign. And so the election was Monday night. He won. I came a distant fourth. And then he died on the Saturday morning. So,
No.
yeah, it was very
No.
sad, just days later. And so
What?
that's what threw us into that by-election situation. And that was hard because they flew out from Ottawa to swear him in, but he went into a coma. And so
Oh my God.
it was, what a thing to have happen, eh? It just,
Yeah.
my heart just went out to his wife and his family. I mean, he had won the thing and he never made it to Ottawa. He never even got sworn in.
And he was the
So
progressive conservative
yeah,
from the
progressive conservative. Yeah. So, and he
wow.
did well. He came first. I came fourth. I got 13.5% of the vote. You get a refund if you get 15%, but I only
Oh
got
no.
13.5. So of course we had $68 in the riding account when I started. And of course I thought, well, that's a few hot dog sales with my high school kids. We could do something with that. But anyway, I lost and thought, what a great experience. And then when someone phoned me on Saturday morning and said he had just passed away, I just
Wow.
thought, oh, poor guy. So I did what I thought, of course, again, was the most diplomatic thing. I phoned Preston Manning. I had never met him yet and said, I just want you to know that this has happened. And you could consider me your warm-up show in Beaver River, because I was back at school already. And so I said, you can run here. So he said, well, we'll thank you and we'll set a meeting again at Pat Chern's house, the president. She lived in Smoky Lake. So the next week, I think we had a meeting up there. And unbeknownst to me, of course, Preston's driving all around Beaver River, which stretched from Edmonton to the Saskatchewan border and the North Saskatchewan River to up Lac La Biche and around, just huge. And so he'd driven around to gas stations and grocery stores and asked people, well, what do you think of this Deborah Gray? And so they said, well, we'd give her a chance now because free trade was the big issue there. So Mulroney
Right.
got a huge majority. And
Yeah.
so Preston came to this meeting and said, well, I've been driving around Beaver River. And he said, I think if I were free to wander the country and talk about reform, and if we were to get a flagpole, as it were, a beachhead in Parliament, if you're there, then we could kind of cover both bases. I said, pardon me? And he said, would you run in the by-election? I thought, whoa, mama. My board, I think we're all, big PCs, and they were not amused by this
Right.
36-year-old pup, upstart, trying to kind of change the world. So anyway, I kept teaching all day, campaigning all night, marking English essays somewhere in the middle there. And
Wow.
we're talking in Northern Alberta winter, ladies. Yeah, so I
Little
carried
cold.
an axe in the back of my car, and I had the voters list. It was this huge box. I didn't know what to do with it. I had a little campaign team. We didn't know what to do with the voters list, but it was
Because there was
perfect.
no
Wait,
digital in those days.
no, nothing. It was a huge
No.
box of paper. And so I had it in the back of my car. I thought, well, that's good ballast, good weight when you're driving around in the snow. And I had an axe and I would just jump out and just bash in campaign signs in the snowbanks. And then on March 13th, 4 months after the general election, I made Canadian history and took 50% of the vote. And I just thought,
Holy
thank
moly.
you, Lord. But what?
Why? Why do you think that
Well, I think
happened?
free trade was a big issue.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed the all candidates debates a whole lot. That was fun. And I really believed in what I was doing. I guess everybody does when they're running an election, but I don't know. It was just sort of a gift right out of left field, but it
For
was great.
those,
So, of course, the next
Wow.
chapter is Deb goes to Ottawa and she's terrified to fly.
hold on.
I never really
Before you
thought
go to
about that.
Ottawa, can for our audience, can you don't have the context of the Reform Party? Can you
Mm,
explain what
hmm
the Reform Party was in those days?
Yeah,
What you stood
fiscal
for?
response. Yeah, the Reform Party talked about fiscal responsibility, just like my mom instilled in me. If you get 10 cents allowance for the week and it's gone by Thursday, you're out of luck, sweetheart. So,
Mm,
you better balance your own book, Debs, when you're 12 years old. And so fiscal responsibility, that a government is only spending our money, not theirs,
mhm,
right? So fiscal responsibility, social responsibility. People always said, oh, you're wacko, one of those social
mm.
conservatives. I would like to think that I have a really hard heart fiscally so I can have a soft heart socially. Because if you're not spending all that money on interest and throwing it here and there, then you have all kinds of money to help the old, the young, the sick, the poor. And so I thought, I love that. And then Senate reform was very big. Lots of people know that we have representation by population in the House. And so, Ontario and Quebec obviously get the bigger number of seats. That's why I, as a British Columbian, never got a chance really to make any diff, because they already announced whether someone had a majority government already before I even went to the polls. So that part was frustrating. Yeah. But Senate reform
was the West wants in, right?
The West wants in.
And
that's
what did
right.
that mean in those days? What was the West wants in?
Just to have a say at the table. Mulroney had a huge majority. And, all the Western MPs, they kept getting outnumbered by all the up guys. And so they'd go and they'd, yip, yip like this, but we didn't see a whole lot of change. But the big deal was in the Senate, because of course every bill has to pass royal assent in the Senate. Your poor listeners are going, oh, brother, why do we have to listen to all this?
No, I love this. I love it.
Well, you guys do. Yeah, you're addicted. Yeah. But, the rest are saying, whoa, this is moderately interesting. Anyway.
I can say I don't know that we've ever talked about the Reform Party on the pod before. So this is, this is great. Great history.
Well, you say this is all about education. So here we go. It's Education 101 with Professor Deb. But the Senate,
Reform Party.
the Quebec and Ontario each have 24 senators. They have a huge number on the East Coast too, in the Atlantic provinces. And every Western province gets 10 senators each. Well, if every bill has to pass through the Senate, I taught English, remember, not math, but 10, 10, 10, 10, the 4 Western provinces equals 40. And Quebec and Ontario equal 48. You're not going to win. So we were, and I still am, a firm believer in a triple E Senate. People have heard that bumped around, but it's equal, with the provinces, and then it's equitable too, so that you have the Senate is always called the chamber of sober second thought. There you are. But anyway, it's never going to pass there when you have that inequity across the line. So I still believe in a triple E Senate. And I will till the day I die, or the day it happens. We'll see.
So I think what I found, there's a lot that's fascinating about this story already. One of the things we hear a lot when we talk to people who get into politics is like little them thought about it. But yours feels more accidental. Like little Debbie, either pre or post camp, wasn't like one day I want to be leader, one day I want to be prime minister, one day I want to be in politics. That doesn't seem like it was your narrative.
Never. So I know, it's fascinating.
So you accidentally win this by-election.
I know.
And then you're off to Ottawa. Okay, so tell us what happens next.
Well, that night was hilarious because we had already done the general election. Where everyone's following it on TV, right? But a by-election happens in the middle of nowhere, nobody's watching it on national news. Well, on by-election day, March 13th, 1989, we had a campaign office in an old flower shop. And so the campaign manager, he had to open the doors to the cooler and go in there. It was warm, but his little desk was in there. I mean, it was just hilarious. And we had a perpetual garage sale going on to raise a few bucks here and there. But we got some fruit trays and we had coffee and pop and stuff like that. And then before it's showtime, when the polls close, I recognized somebody from CTV News, not from St. Paul, Alberta. And I thought, ooh, I think I know that person. And then right behind them comes in another one from CBC. And I start thinking, oh, what in the world's going on? So, of course, I said, hi, welcome, to the campaign office. There's coffee here and surprised to see you here in St. Paul, Alberta. And, I'm just dying to ask them what's going on. But, I'm far too cool for that. So I said, hey, what's up? Nice to have you here. And they said, we think you're going to win. Well, I just about exploded because remember where the voters lists were? We had no voter ID. I had no idea. And so I said,
So you
great.
had no idea going into election night that you had no idea.
Zero.
You were surprised at your own
No,
win.
I wasn't. I was stunned at my own win.
Wow.
I know, isn't this hilarious? When I tell this story, I just think, this can't be true. But it is. But all these national reporters are there. And of course, they've been doing polling. Well, we didn't know how to do any polling. We didn't know how to do any voter ID. So anyway, it was wild. It was
So
very
you
fun.
become the first Reform MP to join the House of Commons. You did not have party status because it was more than one.
Yeah.
So what, explain to us, you show up in Ottawa from Alberta. What was that like?
It was wild. Somebody somewhere booked me a hotel, I guess, the party maybe. And so I had a hotel and I got a cab and saying, well, so I told the guy that, I was going and I was new here. So he asked me, and then he said, I think I recognize you from TV. It said hockey night was on, of course, on by-election night. There was a hockey game and there's a little line going across the bottom. Reform MP gets elected in Beaver River. So that's how the country found out about it. But this taxi driver recognized me. And so he was going to take me to my hotel. And he said, do you want to see where you're going to be working? So, of course, I said, sure. It was great. So he drove me to Parliament Hill. It was March. And it was freezing, of course. It was freezing. And so I looked up at the Peace Tower and I just thought, wow, this is my new classroom. It just, he was really a great guy, just a great guy. And I had been teaching for 10 years then. And I just felt, how you get that thing in your gut, just it goes round and round. And I thought, I wonder if I'm getting ready for a bigger classroom. I didn't know what. My sister was in real estate. I thought, maybe I could do that. And so I just had no idea what it was. And then, boom, a bigger classroom. How's Parliament Hill for you, Deb?
It's a big classroom.
Big classroom.
And so somebody set me up a meeting with the speaker. It was John Fraser. He was just really, really nice to me because I had no whip. I had nobody, man. Yeah. And so John Fraser was really nice, and he said, we'll get you office space. And so he became my little whip and said, you have it. Well, I got John Dahmer's old office, and everybody who had moved in, they'd taken all the good stuff, right? And then use this as an old broom closet. And so, there's all kinds of stuff there. And so Preston said, well, you'll have to hire some staff. I thought, oh, really? Oh, so yeah. So he sent Linda my way, and Linda worked for me for years. It was just wonderful. And so we had to sit kind of on the floor in this office while we were doing an interview. So she's asking me what I want. Well, what do I know? So I thought, okay, I have to be cool again here, Deb. So I said, so what do you know about working in an MP's office? Because I certainly didn't know what to ask her. So she said, I've been doing this. She'd worked for a couple of Conservative MPs over the years. I could get the office set up. I could do this. I could do that. So I said, that sounds slick. You're hired. So I hired her in 1989. And when I left in 2004, she was still there with me. And I loved her and appreciated her so much. And then she says, who are you going to get?
What was the reception like?
Oh, pretty.
To having, you're this Reform MP. Was it icy?
Yeah,
was it like...
How did people feel about the Reform?
An Ottawa morning in winter. Yeah.
It was?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Jean Chrétien, he and I have laughed about this over the years because we're all one big happy family now in the Conservative Party. And so I appreciate him. But he said in the press, that Deb Gray, she's going to have to sit so far off in the corner in the nosebleed section that, no one will ever hear her or see her. Well, of course, if we fast forward to 93, what happened? Elsie Wayne and Jean Chrétien were the only two PC members left. How is it going up there, Jean, in the corner? But anyway, we've laughed about it over the years, but it was tough. Probably the best story that I could tell about how it was You girls have probably been in the lobby, in behind the chambers, where they had fax machines then. They don't have that now. Phones, tables, computers and stuff you could talk. And then at lunchtime, they would deliver sandwiches. Well, I'm all by myself. So the Liberals are over to my right. The NDP are over to my left, and it's lunchtime. And I'm hungry. I'm sitting in the house. So I went out to the lobby and I thought, oh, there's a huge tray of sandwiches there, or two. So I went over to the Liberals. I said, hi, guys. And I mean, I already knew them. I'd been there a little while. And so I said, I'll just have a sandwich. Leave those sandwiches alone. Those are our sandwiches. And I thought, ooh, a little test. So then, of course, I go over, I think the NDP, they share alike, loving, wonderful. Yeah, okay. So you know the rest of the story, don't you? So I went over, I said, hi, guys. I'm just going to get a, leave those alone. Those are our sandwiches. So I was so disgusted and hurt, and mad. I walked down to the Spark Street Mall and bought a hot dog. But I asked Linda, and you should always do your homework first, but it never crossed my mind. Never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. So I phoned Linda in my office and said, I just feel like an idiot here, but these guys told me that I can't have these sandwiches because they're theirs. She said, give me 30 seconds. She phones the parliamentary restaurant. They said, no, those are provided to the MPs. Well, so the next day, I went over to the table. I said, hi, guys, I got a big plate. And I loaded on way too many from the Liberals. I said, these aren't your sandwiches. These are our sandwiches, the taxpayer, from the parliamentary restaurant. So I loaded up, then went over to the NDP, loaded up, said the same thing to them. And I just said, I'm having a sandwich because it's not yours. And you just think, are you kidding me? That is the height of petty with a capital P. And never did they fuss again. Wow. Cheesy, eh?
That's some good tea.
Yeah.
I like that one. That was some good tea. Okay, let's fast forward. So you serve as an MP. At what point, at what juncture do you decide to yourself, you know what I'm going to do now? Forget this classroom, new classroom. I want to be the leader. Like that, you've gone from being a teacher to somehow getting convinced to get into politics, to running, to winning. But that's still a leap then to decide, not only do I want to run and serve, I now want to lead. So tell us what happened. What was the juncture, the decision, the catalyst that you made to get to leader?
Oh, Amanda, just another accidental incident. When we formed
also, as a Liberal, I would share my sandwich with you any day.
Well, thank you, dear. And I with you.
You're welcome.
I'd take you to the Spark Street Mall and buy you a hot dog.
I love it. I love a hot dog.
Okay. Anyway, well, that was another accidental thing. I served as deputy leader under Preston for years, and we went through the United Alternative, and we were slowly becoming the Conservative Party of Canada. But in the middle there, Preston stepped down and said he was going to run again as leader for this new entity. And so that's the one that Stockwell, they eventually won. But Preston stepped down and they needed an interim leader. Well, of course, I'm just a team player and I'm thinking, gee, who could we get to do that? When my caucus took a unanimous vote and said, Deb will be the leader. I said, oh, so I didn't run for it.
How many caucus members did you have at that point?
That was after the 93 and the 97 election. We went from my one seat to 52 in 93 and then to 60. So I served at my caucus's will, basically, in the spring and summer and into the fall of 2000. And because, July 1st for an MP, that's a busy, busy day, wherever you are in the country. And of course, it was my birthday. So I just said, I'll do all this stuff and then we'll find the best place to watch fireworks that night. So I said, well, if I ever want to become, going down to Ottawa for July 1st, the year 2000 just seemed so cool. And I was leader then. So spent it down there. I just need to back up a little bit. Got elected in 89. In 91, I was going to be speaking up at the Edmonton end of my riding. And my friend Donna Larson, who ran the Reform Party office in Edmonton, I said, I have a free night. I can't believe it. Do you want to have supper? And she said, I'm in shock. You have a Saturday night free. she said, yes, Keith and I will make reservations for supper, and I'm going to bring his brother Lou along. He's living on his own. He could use a decent meal. So I said, okay, is he boring? And she said, no, he's kind of crazy. You'd like him. So we met then in the fall of 91, and he proposed to me on my 41st birthday on July 1st. In 1993, remember, Kim Campbell was prime minister?
Yes, of course.
And we thought she was just going to drop the bomb and hold the election right away. But she started talking about the summer barbecue circuit. And so Lou proposed to me on July 1st, and we got married on August 7th, 5 weeks later. So yeah, that was fun. And we're ready. He's just sitting out in the living room. We're ready to have our 33rd anniversary this summer. Isn't that fun? So he's a good-natured soul. And he was not a motorcycle rider, as I am.
Yes.
And he'll tell anybody, I ride bike, but Deb's the biker.
You are. That's like one of your signature things, is that you're such an incredible motorcycist.
I'm just starting year number 59 next month.
Crazy.
Wow.
Crazy.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Can't wait.
So you had 70 people in your caucus. Preston Manning decides that he is going to step down as leader. You have now decided, okay, maybe I want to do this. Like, how did that happen?
Oh, well, I didn't really think anything about it. He was stepping down and running then. And so I said, I'm going to remain neutral in this as leadership because I was deputy leader. And then my caucus decided, we were 60, not 70 that year. Oh. And so the caucus said, well, we think Deb should be interim leader. And it wasn't like, I don't recall it as, Deb, would you like to be leader? Or me saying, well, guys, guess what? I'm going to be your new leader. I just could never dream of saying that. So anyway, again, it was another one of those accidental things that saw me in that position for a few months. And so I thought, oh my goodness, here I am. So I just thought, again, Lord, help me be the best in this position that I can be. So managed to get through that summer and into fall. And then the merger happened a couple of years later. And so I just thought, wow. My first legislative assistant was a guy named Harper. Preston said, you need somebody to help with legislation. Yeah, I said, I was going to ask. Oh, I need help with legislation? Well, yeah, I'm an English teacher. I know nothing about legislation. So Stephen was our chief policy officer for the party. And so Preston said, you need to get down there and help this girl because she is, a good talker and quick wit, but she knows nothing about politics. And so Stephen said, nope, I'm taking my master's in economics and I'm not going. But my swearing in was on the 3rd of April in 89. And so I was into the spring session. And so Preston just twisted his arm and he said, I will go down for 1 year. And I often laugh and say, oh, I wish I had checked his pay stubs because I bet he was exactly a year. And then he went back and finished, and he seemed to do okay for himself.
Not bad. And he became the prime minister a few years later, Stephen Harper.
Not too shabby.
I introduced him one day, and I said, I was his boss, and now he is my prime minister. And I thought, whoa,
wow.
That's another one of those, in the back of your neck. So it was very fun, and I love him to this day. We don't contact each other lots, but he's a tax time baby. His birthday's the last day of April, and so I remember his, and he remembers mine, of course. So he did okay, and so did I. Then the Conservative Party was formed in 2002, and I just felt like I had been that thin edge of the wedge that came in. Elsie Wayne used to say to me all the time, Deb, come back home to the PC fold. I said, it never was home for me, Elsie. Right. I was never politically involved. I can't go back home because it never was home. But anyway, you saw how Peter MacKay and Stephen, put this deal together. And so now, it's ancient history now. These new MPs, half of them don't have any clue about what it was like building that entity. So it's pretty cool to look back on. I'm a living museum piece.
You are. And that's what makes you so special and so fascinating. And you're so good at articulating all of that history and giving us insights into what that time was like.
Do you think that any of the values that first brought you into the reform movement sustained? Do you think they're a part of today's conservative movement, or do you think things have been lost along the way?
Yeah. I think generally the idea of fiscal responsibility and speaking on behalf of your constituents, I think that's still very much alive in the Conservative Party. There are still some leftovers, from my time there. Shannon Stubbs is one. She worked for me when she was a kid at university.
Wow.
In my constituency office. And now when she got elected, the highest honor I could have been paid was somebody said, look out, guys, House of Commons, Deb Gray 2.0 is coming in Shannon Stubbs.
Wow.
And she's in my old area now. It's called Lakeland Riding. Now it was Beaver River. But anyway, Shannon is just an old time reformer. And lots of those kids who were interns back in that time, Mark Strahl, there's a bunch of them that are old time reformers for sure. But, I think they're still pounding the drums, and I'm pretty proud of what they're doing. I met this kid named Pierre Poilievre when he was, I think he was in his first year university, and I was speaking out in Kananaskis, west of Calgary. And so I flew into Calgary, and the party sent him in a big black SUV. I thought, man, yikes. So he came and picked me up, and the airport in Calgary is way northeast and Kananaskis is way southwest. And he was just the whole time. And I just thought, wow, this kid is brilliant and he's really going to go places. And so I look at him now and think, wow, just
what a connection.
But before he led the party, you did.
Yes.
Or a version of it anyway. You became the first. You were the first woman to lead a federal party at that time. And I'm curious, did you realize how historic it was then or only in hindsight?
Well, I think you realize at the time that this is big. But maybe looking at it now, that was 2000. Whoa, Y2K. That's a long time ago already. And so I see some of the amazing things that have happened since then. Our party has had very sharp women, leading it on interim basis. Rona Ambrose, just great. Candice Bergen. There's a lot of pretty sharp women there. And so as we celebrate Women's Day, I don't ever want anyone to say to me, oh, Deb, do this because you're a woman, or if Preston Manning had ever said, vote for Deb, she's a woman, he would see my South End going north, because that is so, it's just icky to me. That's the only word I can think of is icky. If you're going to put me in because I'm capable, because I have some abilities, and I happen to be a woman, I think that's very cool too. Don't pity me because I'm a woman. Celebrate it.
You're here.
And I'll show you, we go 2 for 1, and I'll go toe to toe with you anytime, any place.
We believe it. We've seen the clips.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I want to ask you about your book, which I told everybody I read as a young staffer in Ottawa. It's called Never Retreat, Never Explain, Never Apologize. Why did you name it that?
My politics. I named it that after Nellie McClung. She was one of the famous 5,
That's
one of the first persons, and she was very cool too. But people say, "Oh, well, if you're wrong, of course you should apologize." We as Canadians, that's all we ever do is apologize. So I knew that was going to come at me. You have to have an answer, right, before anyone asks a question. So I put a caveat on the first page saying, I am the first person to apologize if I know I blew it. I have apologized to my staff. Lord knows I've apologized to my husband more than once in 33 years. And, I think, but we just go around saying sorry all the time. So when you're on the right track, that's the time that you go for it. Her whole quote was, never retreat, never explain, never apologize. Just get the thing done and let them howl. And I think, oh,
it's such a good one.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So
you'll also love that her great-granddaughter worked for me in politics.
Really?
Caitlin McClung. She worked when I worked for Gerard Kennedy as education minister. She came in as our intern.
Oh,
how fun is that?
Are you still in touch with her? Will you tell her hi?
Yes, I actually just saw her recently. I certainly will.
Where is she, roughly?
She's here. She's in Toronto, but
okay. Oh, tell her hi.
She's not in politics anymore, but she works corporately. But I will tell her hi, and she's wonderful.
Now this is ridiculous, but I'm just sitting at my desk. Wait a minute.
I love these moments. Where is she going? What is she getting? We don't know.
My niece Kate. Oh, the lamp's in the way. Dirty dog. Just a sec. My niece Kate found a place in. She thrifts in Victoria, and there's Nellie McClung, and there's.
Oh my gosh!
Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
I know it's really big.
Caitlin listens, so she'll hear this. She'll hear this.
Really? Oh, good. Well, tell her I have this picture. And if she ever comes out, and there it is, famous 5 persons to be honorary senators. So anyway, if I ever see Caitlin, I want her to sign that picture, okay?
Yeah.
We're going to make that happen. Yeah. That's going to happen.
That'd be very cool. I rarely go to Toronto, but, why would I? I live on Vancouver Island.
I'm fair.
Okay.
I went to Vancouver
I have a question.
Rachel had a deal.
I know.
She came all the way over for our event.
This is among the many reasons why Rachel loves you. I have a question about your leadership.
Yes.
If you could revisit one decision from that era, do you know what it would be? And why?
Boy. I can't. Offhand.
Okay.
Does that mean I did everything right? No, not at all. Does it mean I did nothing wrong? No, not at all. But nothing jumps out at me like, oh, Deb, biggest regret ever. So I'll probably think of something as soon as we hang up. But generally, my style of leadership is, and maybe that comes from me, girl number 4 in my family, is I want to get the parties together. I used to have tea time in my office, and it wasn't golf. If I knew there was some friction in the staff, or I needed a big decision, or I noticed that something just wasn't quite right, because you know how that goes, I would have tea time. So I'd make tea or coffee, whatever anyone wanted, come in and say, okay, I want your side of the story. I want your side of the story. And somewhere in between there always is the truth. And I'm the leader here. And of course, in my business, our business, it's my name on the lawn sign, right?
Yeah.
So I am, you are a reflection of me. And so I'm going to take it all. I will make a decision based on all the info I can get. And then I live with it. I don't second guess myself. I think I get as much info as I can. I'll make a decision, and that's the decision that's going to stick. So a lot of people, they just waffle so much, So I find that frustrating, because if you're working for a leader like that and they're a waffler, I mean, I need to be a leader that someone wants to follow. And we've all had leaders where you just think, holy smokes, they don't know up from sideways. So I always made sure that I gave everyone a chance to talk. Now, my staff might phone into you and say, oh, yeah, no, I remember a time. And I didn't do everything right, guaranteed. But I just think, wow, if you're going to lead, you need to be strong. And a good sense of humor helps a whole lot. Here's something that I watch these days. And of course, I just watch everything with mild amusement and think, ooh, I'm so glad I'm not in the House of Commons anymore. But I just look at people, and what's with everyone being so offended all the time by everything? And I think, boy, I mean, I had to have tough skin. I was walking behind one of the NDP bunch after the sandwich day. I was walking out of the lobby, and I was just coming along, and then 2 NDP women, started walking in front of me. And so I was basically lockstep right behind them. And she said, that Deb Gray, she's not a bad woman, for a reformer. And so I said, careful what you say, girls. I'm right behind you. And then they tried to be polite, but the cat was out of the bag already. So, and then I would eat in a restaurant by myself all the time down at the cafe down there off Spark Street. And it's not there anymore. Maybe it is. But anyway, I would eat there. And then Stephen and I would eat there sometimes. But when I was on my own, they would say things like, oh, that's her. That's the reformer. Like I had some dreaded disease. So, of course, I loved it when I'd walk up to them and go, ooh, I don't know what I have, but whatever it is, you have it now. And they just, they felt like an idiot. They should have felt like an idiot, really, So anyway, I mean, I just think life is tough. Yeah, it's hard. People will pick on you all the time, but try not to get so offended about absolutely everything. Throw it back at them with a smile. They'll think about it that night. Oh, I got this knife in my back, but so I don't know. And I just am grateful for a strong faith and a good sense of humor. It has stood me well for nigh on 74 years.
Yes, it has. And oh gosh, your sense of humor is hilarious. I want to end on the question of, how do you want history to remember Deb Gray?
History to remember Deb Gray. She was quick to respond to a dare because she loved the country. And she will never be bonkers in an old folks' home wishing she had done more for her country.
Oh, that was a good one. I almost started crying. That was so lovely.
I just made that up right now.
That
but
was
that just
really
comes
good.
Right from, yeah.
Wow.
People say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Say, I gave it my best shot. Why didn't you do anything? Yeah. So, yeah. My mom said to me a few years ago, Deborah, dear, she said, we were walking around the seawall down at Ogden Point in Victoria. She said, I think I'm going cuckoo. And I said, no, Mom, you already are cuckoo. It was Nana, your mom, before you. Now it's your time. And before you know it, it's going to be my time. So I probably will be an old lady in the home, bonkers. But I'll never have any memories like shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Oh. Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that's a perfect example to provide to all of those who are listening this International Women's Day. Yeah. Any last word to women who are listening right now, who are thinking about getting into politics, who are hearing your story and wondering if it's for them?
Yeah. If you're thinking about getting into politics, unlike myself, who didn't really think about it, but had a pretty good run for 15 and a half years. If you're thinking about it, think seriously about the challenges. It is, it's ugly with social media these days. I mentor many young MPs who you're just practically scared to have a town hall meeting because you don't know what's going to happen. And people are just videoing every single thing you say, and then they'll take a clip out of it. So you need to be strong, and know in your gut that this is what you want to do. It's not for the glory. It's not for the fame. But if you have a burning desire to say, you know what, I love my country, give it a kick.
Thank you, Deborah Gray.
Thank you, Deb. We so appreciate you being with us.
Wow. Oh, this has been great.
And thank you for your ongoing service to the country.
Oh my, I just horse around. Really, I do. I do.
I feel like I have 1,000 more questions, so we may have to get you back on this show.
Oh, you have to go for supper if you're in Toronto.
Yeah, we're out of time, but we will definitely have you back, and we so appreciate this. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. And say hi to Sheila for me.
We will.
Sure will.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.
See you guys.
And now a word from our title sponsor, DoorDash. We're proud to share that Beyond a Ballot continues to be powered by DoorDash. Just like we go beyond a ballot DoorDash goes beyond delivery. This week, we're sharing Sindhu's story. She arrived in Canada in 2023 as an international graduate and was searching for part-time work when she met another Dasher who showed her the app and encouraged her to give it a try. Very quickly, she realized that she could build her own schedule and shape the work around her life. Originally from Burnaby, BC, and now based in Toronto, Sindhu has appreciated being able to continue dashing on her own terms while settling into a new city. For her, dashing allows her to be her own boss. Sindhu's story shows how DoorDash makes flexible earning possible on Dashers' own terms.
Our next guest is a trailblazer in Canadian public life. Sheila Copps made history as Canada's first female deputy prime minister under Jean Chrétien and served in some of the country's most high-profile cabinet roles. Over decades in politics, she became known for her fearless style, her sharp political instincts, and willingness to stand by her convictions, even when it meant putting her own seat on the line. She was part of the famed Liberal Rat Pack. She wrote the books Nobody's Baby. Can't wait to hear more about that. And Worth Fighting For. We're excited to talk about her legacy, the books, the evolution of Canadian politics. You know who we're talking about. Sheila Copps, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Sheila, we're going to start at the beginning because everyone is always so curious how somebody who has such a big political life even gets into it in the first place. So how did you get involved in politics? Was this something that like little Sheila thought about in elementary school, or was this something that came much later?
Well, I didn't think about myself getting involved, but I grew up in a political family. My dad was a radio broadcaster when I was growing up. And I think when I was about 8 years old, he ran in his first campaign for what they called in those days Board of Control, which was like the whole city of Hamilton. It wasn't like aldermen split off. Mm-hmm. And then when I was about 10, he ran for mayor. So he was the mayor of Hamilton starting in around 1962. So, of course, I grew up with traveling with him around to bingo halls to campaign. And in those days, you were allowed to put down like a $10 stuffed animal or something. Now they'd probably boo you out of the place. But in any case, I always loved doing the campaigning part, and I went around with him. And so I thought in my mind, when I was sort of mapping my own life's journey, I never thought about being a politician, but I did think that at some future stage in my life the habit in those days was you'd have a full career, usually as a lawyer, but possibly in broadcasting or something else. And then in your 50s or late 40s, you would have a secondary career in politics. So that's what I thought initially. I might have a secondary career in politics, but I was never intending to do it as a first career. So the impetus really came from both my parents were very interested in public policy, and we'd have lots of debates around the table about crazy stuff, like, if you can believe it, in those days, you weren't allowed to go to stores on Sunday. There was no Sunday shopping, and that was like a huge issue, and they had to vote at City Hall as to whether we should be allowed to have Sunday shopping, and they had all these rules about even alcohol, no alcohol on Sunday. Totally. My father used to go to this restaurant on Barton Street called Martin's Grill. And in those days, they'd say, "Oh, Mr. Copps, would you like your apple juice?" And then, of course, they'd bring out some rye, right? That's how they got around it. They didn't really pursue the laws, as it were. But that was before they allowed liquor on Sundays, because they used to allow liquor in restaurants, but you weren't allowed to serve it on Sundays, which is sort of weird because that was the only day that our family ever ate in a restaurant.
So your dad was the mayor of Hamilton. You obviously had a political home that you grew up in, but how did you actually get your name on the ballot first? You started in provincial politics.
It was a bit odd because I was working at the Hamilton Spectator. I finished university. I took a degree in French and English. Initially, I was interested in journalism, but I wasn't that keen on the journalism course. I went to Western, and so I decided to do full languages, which I did. And then I got a job working for the Ottawa Citizen. So my first full-time job was working as a reporter for the Ottawa Citizen. And after a couple of years, I actually came home. I got married in kind of a very quick, bad marriage, and decided that my best opportunity was to kind of reset. So I came home, got a job working for the Hamilton Spectator. And at the time, it was the election in 1977, and the Liberals were kind of in a mess. At the time, Bill Davis, John Robarts had been the premier, very popular, conservative, progressive conservative, followed by Bill Davis. The Liberals had the leader, a Hamilton psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Stuart Smith, who was looking for candidates. And the riding that they wanted me to run in, it was literally, the election was called, the writ was dropped. We had no candidate. The previous candidate had been taken into receivership for questionable spending. I don't know, it was a mess. So then somebody said, well, how about a cops? Because my dad had been the mayor for 16 years and very popular and had a good name, like he had a good reputation. So they originally approached my uncle, who actually lives in Toronto, my Uncle Bill, to say, would you be interested in running in this seat in Hamilton? And he said, well, I live in Toronto, so that's probably not a good idea. So then they said, well, what about you? And they approached me. And I was kind of, at the time, I was intrigued. But what was interesting, I went to talk to my boss, who was the editor at the paper. And when I first got hired to be a reporter, he told me, Sheila, I hope you realize, and this is like a direct quote, you'd probably be sued now, but I hope you realize we're going over our quota of women by hiring you.
Wow.
He told me that, right? And then he hired me anyway, so he hired me. And then after he hired me, I went to him saying, and I'd been approached by the Liberals to run, and what did he think before I made a decision? He goes, he said, you don't have a hope. He said, you're just being used as a sacrificial.
Sounds like a great guy.
They're just using. And of course, that was like, well, you don't have a hope is like a red flag to a bull. So I said, thank you, I'm leaving. And I ran. And I actually lost by 14 votes. So it was a very close race. Yes, it was 14 votes. And anyway, for a lot of different reasons, some of which were stupid things I did on the campaign, which were actually articulated in my first book, which you can get from the public library. Anyway, I lost. And the guy who won, he was also a newbie. His father had been the NDP MLA for years and years. And then he took over his job. When I lost, I basically said, I'm running again. And I was hired by Stuart Smith to run his constituency office because it was in Hamilton. And I ran that for 4 years. And I also started working toward my reelection. So in 1981, I beat the same person in a provincial riding by over 3,000 votes, which was pretty sound at the time. Because the riding had not been Liberal since 1934 or something. Like it was just always NDP. So
can I ask you?
It was a bit of a good win. And that was back in 1981. But I did spend from 77 to 81 kind of organizing and getting it and making sure that, as you know, when there's a nomination and somebody comes close, all the political vultures in the party come in and want the nomination. So I sort of made it very clear. I'm running again and I'm organizing. And so that's what I did. And then the rest was history. I was elected in 81. And then in 84, when the federal election came around, that was, again, David Peterson was the leader, but Mr. Davis was still doing very well and nobody saw him leaving. So I decided to, and John Munro, who was my successor, my predecessor in Hamilton, he resigned. So I decided to leave and run federally in 84, which is when I got elected.
Can I go back? Can I go back a little bit? Because Hamilton is typically steel town, NDP land. And you mentioned that most of the people elected were NDPers. Why the Liberal Party? Did you sit down and think, this is why I'm aligned to liberal values? Was it your dad and his political views? Like, what was it that drove you to the Liberals?
As much to do with, I think the thing about the Liberals is as a perspective, they're quite pragmatic. And I think I like that. I knew a lot of NDPers. They're very ideological. It's not my cup of tea to be ideological. I think there's more than 50 shades of gray in everything. And I would never be conservative. That wasn't even a consideration. But as far as the NDP were concerned, I found them too ideological and usually like sort of brother, sister, all that sort of jargon didn't really ring true to me. So when I ran, I did run and I worked very hard with a number of unions because most of them do have they have a public face to support the NDP, but most of them actually voted for me in my riding. The NDP couldn't take me out after I won. But that was probably family as well. I mean, I knew my dad had been a liberal and my mother was more of a socialist almost because her mother came from the UK, and I would say my mom was probably more of a socialist. So I was kind of a left-wing liberal, but I always felt that liberals had solutions to problems and NDPs had problems for solutions. That's how I kind of looked at it.
Okay, so I have to know, you get elected federally in 84. In just 2 years later, you write the book, Nobody's Baby, A Survival Guide to Politics. Now, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this actually comes from a moment in Parliament when a cabinet minister told you to quiet down and you shot back, I'm nobody's baby. I got to tell you, a line like that, I'm loving it.
Love it.
Every woman who's listening right now is loving that. True story? That happened?
Well, he actually said, quiet down, baby. And that sort of, I think that was partially the trigger, but it was also, even though I had only been 2 years in federal politics, don't forget, I started working politically in 1977 and I wrote the book in 1986. Right. So that was almost 9 years because I had 4 years as a political assistant and then 3.5 years in provincial and then federal for 2 years. So what I found when I got there is there's, especially for women at the time, there was very little advice or help in how to get there and when you get there, what to do there. So because I had a background in writing, obviously writing was my first love, which my degree being in English and French and languages were always my love. I just decided to write this book while I was still sitting in Parliament. And it wasn't intended to be an autobiography. It was more intended literally to be a guide as to, if you're interested, and for like the women who are your audience, if you are interested in politics and you want to know what you have to do to think about even getting there, because some people may decide after they take a look at it, they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
But when you decide that you want to be a candidate, how you do it, what are the best methods that I use to build community support and that kind of thing. So it really was intended to be more for kind of how to break through the old boys club, because back at that time, when I was elected provincially, I was the only woman in the Liberal caucus and I was 28. I think the average age of my colleagues was 54.
Wow.
And it was a bit of a shock to go into a situation like that where you're literally surrounded by almost all white men, older, and with a particular perspective on what a woman should do, which is kind of shut up and
quiet down,
so
baby.
that's why the Quiet Down Baby by John Crosby became a kind of a rallying cry for women. And the other thing you didn't mention, which I think was also relevant, in 1986, I actually was the first woman ever to have a child while being
Yes, I was just going to ask about that.
That sort of was also a trigger, because whenever I used to see Mr. Crosby in the elevator, he'd go, "Oh, you're getting fat," just like he'd make these comments that would just want like cringe-worthy comments. Well, this was at a time when if you were a woman, you certainly were either you were a lesbian, because you wouldn't be in politics if you actually liked men.
Wow.
Or if you were pregnant, you should kind of quit right now and go home and do what you're supposed to do. So it was kind of a combination of all the above. So definitely Mr. Crosby had a role to play in it. But I must say, when he retired, he said the thing that really bummed him out was that all people remember about him was what he said about me. And we became friends. My husband's from Newfoundland.
You became friends with
in his latter years, when he was living in a retirement home, I actually used to go and visit him, and we'd have a bit of a laugh together and stuff.
Wow.
So he was a different generation. I mean, he was like almost my dad's age, and many men in those days had a different view of the world, especially women being in politics. It was really, not your place to be there, and you should kind of buzz
Can
out.
so I wanted to ask you, because you did note that you were the first woman to give birth while holding federal office in the history of Canada. And that was the 80s. It's not like this was like ancient history, which is crazy. What was that like? So you had your baby. Did you take time off? Did you bring the baby to the house? Like, in today's day and age, you can breastfeed on the floor. What was it like for you in the 80s?
Well, and also you have distance voting and all that. We didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to bring her on the floor, but she was born at the end of March. And I think on about the 4th of April, Ronald Reagan came to town. And of course, me being in politics, I didn't want to miss Ronald Reagan. So I came in and I brought her with me. I was breastfeeding. I breastfed her for the first 5 months, which actually for women who are having children, it's actually easier because you don't have to worry about warming the bottles and all that stuff. So I brought her in with me, but she was upstairs kind of sleeping. And I remember I had this kind of silky blouse on. It was kind of orangey. Cool. And all of a sudden, one of my friend's colleagues leaned over and said, Sheila, I think you need to go to the bathroom. Like I was leaking.
Oh my.
Leak the size of a cow on my blouse as I was listening to Mr. Reagan. And then after we went out to the scrum, I ran off to the bathroom and changed my blouse. So that was early. After he left, I really didn't go back to full-time work until, so she was born in March. We finished the season off fairly quickly, and then I started back full-time in September. So I took about 4 or 5 months off. Not fully off, but as you know, in the summer, it's a lot easier for you to kind of manage your schedules and stuff like that. I think it was more difficult for me to manage when I became a minister, because when you're a member, you're kind of a bit like your own boss. So you can set the hours, you can set the times. And even now with distance voting and everything, it's even more simple. In those days, you had to be there. And they had night sittings, which you could go until 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night. But I think when I became a minister, it was more difficult because, ministerial responsibilities have a place of their own. I had, I think, 32 hours of meetings a week before I could even have a meeting that I wanted. Wow. So I was constantly, and then they're calling you up, sign off on these documents. It's 11 o'clock at night. They're coming knocking at the door. Like, it's very much, you're not your own boss when you're a minister, much less than when you're an MP.
So during that time, during that era, there's a really famous term. You were part of the Liberal Rat Pack. What does that mean? Who was in it? Why were you a Rat Pack?
How'd you get such a cool name?
Well, the Rat Pack actually came, don't forget, in 1984 when I was elected, I was the only liberal elected between Toronto and Windsor. 7 million people. The rest of them were all mostly conservatives, a few NDPers, but mostly conservatives. This was
during
Mr. Mulroney had the sweep, and it was 211 seats. Out of 211 at the time, I think the total number, it wasn't even 300. I think it was maybe 299. Anyway, it was certainly the largest majority government in the history of Canada in relative terms. And a lot of our people who had lost, I think we were 40 and the NDP were 34. And everybody was saying, just like when Mr. Trudeau came back, oh, the Liberals are dead. They're going to be dead. It's going to be the Liberal demise, and it's going to be the NDP and the Conservatives, and the Liberals are gone forever. This was 1984. So I was new and enthusiastic. We had a bunch of people of the 40 who were not enthusiastic and who basically just wanted to kind of go away and hide for a year or two and lick their wounds. So the group that was new, of the group, Brian Tobin was there. There were actually 2 francophones who were less known, but one of them became very well known as a separatist and then died in a tragic plane crash, which was Jean Lapierre. Yeah. There was Jean Lapierre, Jean-Claude Malépart.
Oh my gosh.
Who was a real street fighter, who actually was in Gilles Ducep's seat before as a Liberal. And then there was Don Boudria, myself, John Nunziata.
Oh, wow.
And the fourth was Brian Tobin. So Tobin and I both had background in media. I had come from print media and he came from television. Don was actually a House of Commons kitchen boy when he first started out. So he knew the house really well. And then in the case of John Nunziata, as you know from City Council in Toronto and ongoing, he was a scrapper. Even though his background was a lawyer, he was kind of a scrapper. So what happened was when we started out, Herb Gray was the opposition House leader. So we would be called on to basically carry question period almost exclusively because of the fact that all of the other, senior people, like let's say Andre Ouellette or Lloyd Axworthy or some of the others, didn't want to say anything. They felt like they should spend their time in purgatory because we were defeated badly. And so we started, and Therese Killens, who's actually a Liberal MP from Quebec, her husband was a bit of an artist. So somehow, I think it was actually the Toronto Star, the former David Vino, who's died, he was a journalist, quite well known. He wrote a column saying that we were like the Liberal Rat Pack. He called us the Liberal Rat Pack first. It was a journalist that gave us the name. And then Therese Killens' husband, I don't know exactly why, but he printed up these T-shirts.
Really?
With the Rat Pack, and it was all of the four of us.
Oh my God.
Parliamentary background, but in red. And so at the Liberal Christmas party, we were running around selling these T-shirts. And then I don't know if you remember, we did crazy things. Like at that point, there was a bit of it was a major scandal. There was a tainted tuna that had been sold, and there had been a bit of a cover-up, and several people died, and about 75 people actually ended up in hospital because the tuna had botulism in it or something. So anyway, and the guy who was responsible was the future speaker. His name was John Fraser. We only knew him as the speaker, but when he was minister, he was very well liked. People really liked him. And we got in a lot of hell from our colleagues saying, you cannot attack him. And we're going, well, okay, he was the Minister of Fisheries. He was told on a certain date about the botulism. He failed to report it. Bob's your uncle. So we went after him aggressively. And at the Liberal Christmas party, we had cans made of tainted tuna. I don't even know where we got them, but we actually had to put them into cans. And we were selling them for $20 a piece. We made a lot of money for the party on tainted tuna. Amazing. And we did a bunch of other crazy things. Like Don had this thing, he called it the Paw Award because we were the Rat Pack. We played on it. So we got the name from the media, but we played on it. So on every Friday, he would come out with the nominees for the Paw Award, which was the patronage award of the week. And he would name the 3 most egregious recipients of patronage. Oh my God. And so he would hand the envelope to me, and I would open the envelope. And the Paw Award this week is so-and-so. And the envelope, please. And then I would say,
I love this.
The poor lady that had the $20, the $15 orange juice or whatever. I don't even remember her name, but she was a minister. So we knocked off, I think, 5 ministers in about 5 months.
Wow.
With our travel.
Wow. Really?
And so then we became known for that. And some of our colleagues were very upset, like Warren Allman, who was a lovely guy. He said, I can't take this. He said, you're attacking these really nice people, because they were really nice people. And a lot of them were very nice people. But we figured our job is, look, either we get in there and actually start making some waves, or we'll be replaced by the NDP. So it was like a life and death matter between 84 and 88. We were the small group that kept the place alive. And Jean Lapierre, as you know, ended up back in the media and was very talented in the media as well. So, and if you go back to Jean-Claude Malépar, little known fact, I don't know if you remember when Mr. Mulroney at one point decided that he was going to increase the senior citizens or decrease the senior citizens' pensions. It was something to do with senior citizens' pensions. And there was a tiny little lady, I forget her name, Solange Denis, I think was her name. Well, she trapped him at the entrance to the parliament, and she said, Charlie Brown, you are not going to change this pension or something. Anyway, it was huge. It made the whole news and everything. Well, of course, Charlie Brown was actually put there by Jean-Claude Malépar because she was one of his friends. So we were kind of in the background, basically making things as difficult as we could for the government, and we were relatively successful. And then in 88, when we came into the election, it was kind of the free trade election, and that was a very interesting time. At that point, I was ready to go into government because opposition was great for me, especially as a learning curve. It was fantastic. But after 9 years,
You were done.
I was ready to try and do something, because you learn a lot too. You learn a lot in opposition about how to make things better. Mm-hmm. And it's unfiltered because you don't necessarily have the bureaucrats writing your notes and your policy notes. And so it gives you a really good background. I think opposition is the best place for anybody to start. Because sometimes people they come into government. Mr. Carney's got that with a lot of new people. And then some of them don't really know how to manage the system because it's complex. Yeah. And when you're thrown into it as a minister, you get no learning curve. And it's the only job where, like, if you were in a company and the company had a hostile takeover, that's one thing. Every election is a hostile takeover. So no former minister comes and says, "Oh, Sheila, you should do it this way," because they want you to fail.
Totally.
So it's a very interesting dynamic that way as well.
So am I right in remembering that you then ran for the leadership of the Liberals after in 1990? Yes. You weren't successful.
Yes, against Mr. Chrétien and against Mr. Martin.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Jean Chrétien comes in as the prime minister, and he makes you the first deputy prime minister in the history of Canada. Is that correct? First woman. Sorry. Yes. First woman. I forgot that part. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So talk to us about getting that call. Did you realize how big of a moment that was, that you were going to be the first woman to be deputy prime minister?
Well, interestingly enough, he had a lot of pushback, including mostly from his senior advisors, not to name me as deputy prime minister. Because in the history of Canada, the position of deputy prime minister is not included in the Privy Council list. So technically it's an informal or a non-recognized position that prime ministers can choose or not choose to exercise. Right. Mr. Mulroney had Eric Nielsen, for example, and then he had Don Mazinkowski. Historically, we'd had quite a few. But I know, because I found out from Mr. Chrétien right from the horse's mouth, that his key people, some of whom you probably had on the podcast, were all saying, "Well, no, don't have her, don't have anybody. You don't need anybody, just run it yourself." And it was Mrs. Chrétien who said, "Follow up," because she was always the one who said, "Look, first of all, you had her as deputy leader in the opposition. Why would you not follow through with that?" And also she knew that I had good political instinct. Mr. Chrétien always called on me for political questions because I had good political skills. And so she was the one that kind of convinced him. And I didn't really know when I went to see him. You know, you come in when you're going into cabinet and they don't tell you on the phone. You go in and you have a meeting. And I think the first meeting was with Mitchell Sharp, who was kind of checking to see if your bona fides, like if you had any criminal records or stuff like that. So you go to see Mr. Mitchell Sharp, so you kind of know you're in the group. But it wasn't until I actually went to see Mr. Chrétien himself, because I knew there were rumors flying around that he was not going to name somebody. So it was like I didn't know. And he told me at the time that it was his wife who kind of put a good word in for me.
Oh my gosh.
So, women
helping women.
Well, there's another story about that, which the women here would appreciate. So when I became heritage minister, I started my first term as environment minister, and then after a couple of years I was put over into heritage, and we were going through a very difficult time. We had program review, and I was on this committee called the Star Chamber, where we had to cut 25,000 jobs, we cut budgets by 25%. It was pretty rough. So anyway, I ended up inheriting the job of Michel Dupuis, who had previously been the heritage minister. He had an issue, and I think he didn't run, or at least lost his position. Somehow I came in. Some of the political people, and Andre Ouellette was one of them, when they were trying to meet their program review, what Andre did, and Michel was too politically naive to realize what was happening. Andre Ouellette said, "Look, I want to give you, because you're responsible for Radio Canada and CBC, I would like to give you Radio Canada International. There's no reason why Foreign Affairs should be covering Radio International, Radio Canada International. So take it over, please, Michel." But he gave it to him with no budget, zero budget. So I inherited this Radio Canada International file And at the time, the budget was about $12 million. It wasn't like a huge budget, but they were operating in 7 languages. They were operating in Arabic. They were operating in Chinese. Anyway, they had an influence around the world. And not everybody was on the internet at that time. Don't forget, it was very radio based. So when I came in, Lloyd Axworthy and I both said, we are going to try and save the funding for Radio Canada. And I went to the finance minister at the time, Paul Martin, and Paul was totally against giving in on any one of the files because his argument, and it's a valid one, is if somebody wins a reversal, everybody's going to want a reversal. So I'm not reversing anything. So I was dealing with that. And at the time, we had a Friends of the CBC committee internally in the Liberal Party. And the chair of that was Mac Harb, who was an Ottawa Centre MP at the time. Anyway, I got Mac working with all the MPs at the Christmas, lots of things happen at Christmas parties. At the Christmas party, we're all running around trying to convince everybody. And lo and behold, it's Mrs. Chrétien at the Christmas party who says, Jean, you have to do this. So he reversed it and he called me up. He called me into his office. He says, this is the only item that I'm reversing. And don't talk about it too much because I don't want the place to sort of fall apart and everybody looking for more money back. So he did actually reverse it. We got the budget back and we saved Radio Canada International. But it just goes to show you how poor Michel, somebody in the department should have told him, this is a Trojan horse. It's a gift horse with no money. Why would you ever take it? And he didn't know enough to say no. So then we ended up stuck with the problem that we did eventually solve through the help of Mrs. Chrétien.
Oh my God. The woman behind the man. I love this.
Yeah.
Another moment. You had so many famous moments, by the way. I was going through like all these references. I'm like, oh my God, she was behind so many interesting moments. One of your most famous moments was the famous resignation, right? So for context for our listeners, yes. In the 93 election, the Liberals campaigned hard against the GST, which had been introduced by Brian Mulroney. You famously said, if the GST isn't scrapped, I will resign. The government later harmonized the tax into the HST instead of eliminating it. And you followed through on your word by resigning your seat in 96.
Wow.
You immediately ran again in the by-election and won easily, returning to cabinet. Some people saw it as political theater, but others saw it as rare accountability. Was resigning over the GST the bravest thing you ever did in politics or the riskiest?
Oh, that was kind of crazy because don't forget, you mentioned about the leadership. I had run in the leadership against Chrétien and against Paul Martin. And I got 499 votes and Paul only got about 900 or something. So I wasn't that far behind him. And we knew eventually Mr. Chrétien wouldn't be there forever. So Paul's people had a pretty good strategy to try and come out after me. And they used to call it the Get Sheila tax.
Whoa.
GST, Get Sheila tax. Because if I could be held accountable, and what people don't realize when I said that, it wasn't that I just ran out and said I'm going to resign. I was on a TV show on the CBC in one of those town hall meetings where they were going, well, we're never going to get rid of it. And they were really attacking me. So I said, wow, I'm so sure that we're going to get rid of it, that if we don't, I'm going to step down.
Wow.
And there were ways to get rid of it. And Chrétien went at the beginning, he said, you got 3 years to get rid of it, which could be, before it was manufacturer sales tax, you could have integrated it. We actually thought it would be smart to integrate it into the pricing. So you get away from when you go to the store now and you pay GST. You could change a few things, take it off books, take it off heating oil. There's lots of things you could have done. But his people didn't really want to do anything. So they were quite happy to see me swinging in the wind. And then I'm sitting there. I remember the day that he came out and made the announcement that he wasn't going to do anything. And nobody told me. I had organized a press conference to talk about copyright. Imagine what an interesting issue. It's a crucial issue, but it's not that interesting. So I get to the copyright and all they want to talk about is, well, Paul Martin's brought in the GST and it's the same. And are you going to resign? And that weekend, that was a Thursday. And that weekend, Prince Charles was coming into my riding.
Oh my
God. On the Friday. And Saturday was a Liberal convention. So I didn't want to resign before Prince Charles came into my riding because the guy would be totally embarrassed. Like we had this, It was just ridiculous.
That's so funny.
So I said, look, I'm going to think about it over the weekend, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And at the Liberal convention, which was held in Windsor, all the media were chasing me around. Are you going to resign? Are you going to resign? Are you going to resign? And I said, well, I'll let you know. And I'm contemplating it, but I haven't made a decision. So Monday, I go into question period, and the whole front bench is empty. Like nobody's there except me.
What?
And I'm thinking, woo, if I go into this and I don't resign, and then Mr. Chrétien, he kind of forgot about this, and this is going to be interesting if he listens to this podcast, because he said to me, don't bother resigning. It doesn't matter. I said, look, I said what I said, and I believe that my reputation is worth something, and I'm going to do it. Because I called him up after the question period. I said, I'm not going to get a lot of support from my colleagues, obviously. I'm going to get hung out to dry. This whole GST thing is going to be on my head. And Tobin actually called me, and he goes, you should resign. And Ron Irwin came to see me too. We were good friends. He was the MP from Sault Ste. Marie, and also a minister of Indian and Northern. And so Ron said, you have to resign. And Tobin said, you have to resign.
So
on Tuesday, I called Mr. Chrétien, and Eddie said, come over to the office. I go, no, I'm not going over to the office, because they had all the media was there. It was going to be Chrétien hauling me in, and that would be the dialogue and everything. So I said, no. I said, I'm going to phone him, set up a phone call. And I said, you're going into caucus tomorrow. This is to the Prime Minister. I said, as when you go into caucus, just tell the caucus that I'm stepping down. And I am stepping down. So this is my notice to you that I'm stepping down. And he didn't want me to step down. He goes, you're going to cause a crisis. I said, well, I don't think so, because I think I can go back and legitimately ask the people, do you still have trust in me? And I'll go back and have an election, which I did. And actually, I got elected with bigger numbers than the numbers before. But at the time, I felt like it was the only way that I could save my integrity. Because when you say something that definitive on television, and then you don't do it, you look like a complete...
Do you regret saying it?
You did the thing.
Do you regret saying it on television?
I think I was inexperienced a little bit. Because at the time, and again, John Nunziata was in the Rat Pack going forward. That issue was a big issue inside the caucus. We went to Vancouver the summer before the election, and basically the caucus got up and demanded that we get rid of the GST, and there was a whole push. And Mr. Chrétien did not want to get rid of the GST because he knew that it would be a big revenue producer and help us to meet some of our economic challenges. But he also knew that the vast majority of the caucus wanted the GST removed. So he said at the time, we'll work on something. And when we came in, Paul had 3 years to come up with an alternative. But it became clearer and clearer that there would be no alternative, and that I was the GST sacrificial lamb, shall we say. So I don't regret saying it, but I think if I had been a little bit more experienced on the government side, I probably wouldn't have said it, because that's really putting yourself out on
Do you still talk to Mr. Chrétien? Are you friends?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have lunch. He has a little group that he gets together with at Christmas time for lunch. And I usually see him 2 or 3 times other than that over the course of the year. But later on, he did come and he said, remember when I told you to resign? And I was like, not really. But I didn't say anything, right? I thought, oh, really? Well.
Oh, my.
But it's interesting because I think that Hillary Clinton got into that. Do you remember when Abu Ghraib, and her recollection was one thing and somebody else was something else. When you're in politics, sometimes the things do blur together and your recollection could be completely different from somebody else.
100%.
So he basically, when Tobin and Ron came to see me and told me to step down, I thought they were kind of proxies for him.
Oh, but they weren't.
And they're saying step down. And so that's why when he said he told me not to step down, I was like, he did tell me that night, don't step down. It's going to cause a crisis for the government. I said, you know what? I don't think so. I think we're going to get through it. But I said, at the end of the day, I also have only one thing which I can leave politics with, which is my reputation intact. Right. So I have to do this. And he wasn't very happy about it.
Okay. I want to leave on one big question. And that is, how do you want history to remember Sheila Copps?
Oh, I think the biggest change, and it is relevant to the 2 books that I wrote, is that I did give women the belief that they could be prime minister.
Yeah.
That if that's one thing that I've seen women now, even bump into them in the elevator or at the airport or on a bus or something, and they all say, "Oh, I know how old your daughter is because I had a baby at the same time, and when I saw you taking her to the office, I thought, I can do this." I think it was the inspirational part of that leadership doesn't have to be only men is what is probably the most important thing that I think I would like people to remember me by. And the other part too is on the environmental side, I started the World Network on Cultural Diversity, and I figured out a way how to beat the Americans at their own game on the so-called magazine wars, which were big in those days. And I think if you look at what Mr. Carney's going through right now with the new world order, we have to be able to tackle world problems in different ways with different solutions, and not always the old world orders. So I think that piece is also really important, because even though the United States was very powerful, when we finally went to a vote at UNESCO for the Cultural Diversity Convention, became a convention in 7 years, and they were the only countries that voted against it were the United States, I think Moldova and Israel, and the whole world supported it. So that shows you that you can do things if you approach it in a kind of a mid-level power way. I think you can get things done and also look at things differently. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sheila Copps. So fun to have you. I have 1,000 more questions, but this International Women's Day, it is a huge pleasure to have you on this show. Really? So a big thank you to you. Yes. A big happy International Women's Day to you. You are a trailblazer in Canadian politics, and I know that there's a lot of women listening right now who are inspired to get more involved or to take the leap because of you. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both for inviting me. It was quite an honor when you sent me that email, Amanda. I did appreciate it, because I know you could have picked any woman for International Women's Day, and you picked me.
Of course. All right, Thanks. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
As we wrap up this special International Women's Day episode of The First, one thing is clear: going first is never easy. Being the first often means stepping into spaces that weren't built with you in mind. It means facing criticism, taking risks, and sometimes standing alone. But it also means changing what's possible. Today we heard from women who didn't just participate in Canadian politics. They actually helped reshape it. By stepping forward, they widened the path for women who would follow. International Women's Day isn't just about celebrating these moments. It's about recognizing where the next firsts still need to happen in politics, in leadership, and in communities across this country. And maybe the real goal isn't just to have firsts. It's to make sure they're no longer so rare. Thanks for listening. From Amanda and I, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you for listening. New episodes air every Friday.
Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and find us at beyondaballot.com.